Everybody ready? All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the fall quarterly meeting of the Tennessee Higher Education Commission. At the outset, we will call the roll.
Chairman Cope.
Here.
Commissioner Dishner. Here. Treasurer Hargett. Commissioner Johnston. Here. Commissioner Coben.
Here.
Treasurer Lillard. Commissioner Morrison. Commissioner Roach.
Here.
Commissioner Stafford.
Here.
Commissioner Soyak.
Here.
Commissioner Watson.
Here.
Commissioner Wharton.
Here.
Comptroller Wilson. Commissioner Winton.
Here.
Mr. Chair, we have 10 present. We have a quorum.
Very good. Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is approval of minutes from the October 15th, 2018 meeting. The floor is open.
So moved.
Motion to approve. Mayor Wharton, is there a second? Second from Commissioner Stafford. All in favor signify so by saying aye. Are there any opposed? Motion carries. Next item is approval of minutes of the July 26, 2018 meeting. The floor is open. From motion by Commissioner Dishner. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Silyak. All in favor signify so by saying aye. Are there any opposed? Motion carries. Okay. First of all, thank you, those of you here in attendance, for indulging us on being a few minutes late. Appreciate your patience. Let me start by giving my opening remarks and comments. I want to start by thanking my fellow board members and also THEC staff for the tremendous amount of work and the good work that they did at the last meeting that we had with respect to the MTSU Law School. That obviously consumed a lot of time and effort, and I just want to express my appreciation to my fellow board members and to staff, and especially you, Director Krause, for your hard work. Very much appreciated. Grateful for all of you. A few weeks ago, I had an opportunity to accompany Director Krause to a state policy retreat in Minneapolis, Minnesota, along with Senator Dolores Gresham, Dr. White from Austin Peay, and Dr. Jackson from Nashville State. I came away from that retreat, which had 12 other states in attendance, with two very distinct impressions that I want to share with you and with the public this morning. First, Tennessee's progress was a central point of discussion in this convention. I'm always proud to be from Tennessee, but I'm particularly proud to be from Tennessee when we are recognized in that environment for the good work that we do here. Lou Hanneman was on our team. Director Krause and Dr. Jackson all made presentations to the conference at various times, as they had been asked to present their perspectives on Tennessee's success. We were constantly being asked, how is Tennessee able to accomplish so much? And to me, the frequent questions embodied the incredible strides that have been made in this state in recent years. I also enjoyed the time that our state team had, moderated by Lou Hanneman, to discuss the master plan, the THEC master plan, which, as many of you know, was adopted in 2015. It's still a good document, but due to the changes in the landscape here in our state and higher education, we all agreed that it's time to take another look at that. And so we began that process, having discussions at this retreat. We hope to be bringing you a new proposed master plan update this spring that incorporates what we hope to be new and very ambitious goals as we continue to march towards the drive to 55. As for today's meeting, I want to comment on the general focus of today. As you will recall, our November Commission meeting sets the stage for the next year in the higher education budget cycle. It is when we review and recommend the appropriations changes, guiding tuition ranges, and capital outlay and maintenance requests for the upcoming fiscal year. These recommendations you will see today highlight Tennessee's determination to meet Drive to 55 in an affordable manner, which is vitally important. The staff recommendation to increase appropriations to our universities, community colleges, and TCATs by $64 million reflects the great successes our state and institutions have accomplished through Tennessee Promise and the Drive to 55. Following its first 3 years of statewide implementation, Tennessee Promise has resulted in an annual increase of 8% in associate's degrees, nearly 30% at some community colleges. That's a significant number. Our universities stand ready to help those Promise graduates continue their education through strong transfer pathways and high-quality bachelor's degrees. Further, the staff recommendation of a tuition and fee increase of 0 to 2.5% represents the 5th consecutive lowest increase in the state in 40 years. We are committed to keeping college affordable in the state. The higher education investment made by the state in the last 5 years has resulted in low to no increases in tuition, and the appropriation recommendation put forward today should continue this trend. Finally, the investment in capacity we see in these recommendations allows the state to strategically apply state resources to needed capital outlay projects. This investment, paired with the state's unprecedented commitment to capital maintenance, will help institutions meet the Drive to 55 goals. It is important for all of us to recognize that this level of investment may not be available every single year. We've been blessed up to this point. Both the state and institutions need to plan for the next recession, whenever that time comes, which it surely will. I'm pleased to hear that our institutions, in coordination with THEC, are already planning for leaner times, and I look forward to hearing more about the recent stress test organized by THEC staff. Finally, in closing, I want to take a moment of personal privilege to recognize UT President Joe DiPietro. Joe, it has been a pleasure to serve with you, and your advocacy for UT and for higher education in this state will leave a lasting impact. And with that, I'd like to give him a round of applause. Where is Dr. DiPietro? And that concludes my report. Director Krause.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Commission. I want to first echo Chairman Cope and thank Dr. DiPietro for his partnership. THEC is only as good as our relationships, and it has been a true pleasure to work with you and your team, and so we're very grateful. I want to talk about two things this morning, and I will lead off by sharing with the Commission. As always, I want to keep you all oriented to what we as the staff are setting as internal priorities over the next 12 months as we begin two transitions. One, obviously, a calendar year transition, but two, an unprecedented transition in terms of government in Tennessee generally. Certainly, on behalf of THEC staff, would congratulate our former commission member and now governor-elect Bill Lee on his victory last night. And also, in reference to Dr. DiPietro, his successor, interim president Randy Boyd. It just goes to show that these commissioner jobs can lead to great places. So as we do that transition, we want to be really laser focused as a staff on three priority areas that I'll share with you. First and foremost is the transition itself, which is a living, breathing thing, I would argue, based on the transitions I've seen for the next really 18 months. As new team members come on board in the administration, as an unprecedented number of new legislators enter the General Assembly in January, I believe it is imperative for our staff to be a voice for higher education on a daily basis. The budget recommendation that you all will adopt today, making sure that it is held intact as much as possible over the course of the next year is our number one priority, because we believe the budget recommendation at its core reflects priorities, and they're the priorities of reaching the Drive to 55. Second, reconnect. You all are going to get to hear later on an in-depth update on where we are in regards to reconnect from Mary Lappin on our team. Reaching these adult learners is going to be, I believe, truly the most important thing we'll do for Drive to 55 this year. We've got some data on who didn't show up this year. We need to deploy it and use it to do better next year. And so our adult learner team is here in the middle. I love sharing the hallway with them because when you walk down there, it is a constant collaboration hub. And to have 6 people solely focused on adult learners every day makes us, one, the only agency in America with that capacity, and two, it makes me hopeful about our ability to really implement Reconnect in a way that no one's expected. No one expected 32,000 people would apply, and no one expected that 14,900 would show up. Even as that number has been revised down slightly, we are still in the high 13,000 student range. Making sure we serve those students moving forward is paramount. Finally, the Commission knows we've really been focused on our distressed counties. Since our last quarterly meeting, we've had the opportunity to go to a few more of these counties. As I have shared with you before, there has not been an economic upturn in these distressed counties. You sense it as soon as you enter the counties, that life is hard there. And the ability for our agency to be able to partner with their high schools to provide high-quality career and technical education that is then linked to dual enrollment and technical opportunities with Chancellor Tidings colleges, we think doing that over the next 12 months, one, is going to really help us move the needle quickly. We are beginning those awards next week in Hardeman County. We'll be in Bolivar, Tennessee. And when you see the types of equipment these high schools needed, it tells you the awards that are being made right now, which are in the $50,000 to $75,000 range, are incredibly impactful in those high schools. To be able to say we've got 6 new welding kits along with the associated vent hoods we needed, it's a game changer for them. So we really look forward to seeing this model push an important policy lever, and that is dual enrollment in Tennessee is not working. Dual enrollment in Tennessee has become about a way to deliver general education credit to students that were already going to college. And I would tell you, I think on behalf of the staff, that cannot be what dual enrollment is. Dual enrollment has to be about reaching students who weren't going to college. While also, we can walk and chew gum at the same time. We need to do gen ed for students who want to show up as sophomores and juniors. But we also need to reach students who never counted themselves in college and do one of two things. Let them see, I can succeed in dual enrollment, and they do progress into enrolling into higher ed, or there are students who will not cross the threshold into one of our colleges after they graduate high school. Making sure that we're providing the optimal opportunities for TCATs and community colleges to get into those high schools could be transformative in those distressed counties and across the state. So on a daily basis at THEC, these will be the things we're focused on over the next 12 months, while of course executing all of our associated tasks as the coordinating board. One of the sentiments we heard last year from the treasurer, and let the record reflect the constitutional officers are currently at the convening with the governor-elect and the current governor. They will be here shortly. But one of the things that Treasurer Lillard conveyed to us as we began to think strategically about Tennessee higher education finance was, what do we as a board, but also institutional stakeholders, know about our financial health? How is that able to holistically link into the budget recommendation that you'll hear later today? That discussion led to our first ever statewide financial stress test. I'm going to ask Stephen Gentile to come up and walk you through that. I will say that those conversations for us have been very illuminating. We have campuses whose composite financial index is not where they would want it to be, or where I think maybe we would want it to be as a coordinating board. We have a lot of campuses that have been thinking deeply about this, though. They've been thinking deeply about this for years. They showed up instantly knowing how they would weather a downturn. But the real value was that collective conversation. Room full of CFOs with our team sitting there thinking collaboratively about, as Chairman Cope referenced, the inevitable downturn when it arrives. How do we weather that? How do we weather it particularly without tuition being the immediate handle that we pull in times of duress? And I just truly want to thank the campuses that took part in that. We were learning as well. We're continuing to learn. But I want to ask Stephen Gentile and our team to walk you through some of the preliminary results. Stephen.
Thank you, Director Krause, Chairman Cope, members of the Commission. We did meet about a month ago. We convened UT, TBR, the 6 LGIs, the CFOs at each of those entities, as well as some other leadership from those institutions, along with Treasurer Lillard and his staff at the Commission. And I want to go over what we talked about, how the stress test was created and formed. I know you guys have the slides in front of you. My goal is to hit on each of them briefly. I can go into more detail as you wish. The key rationale behind the stress test, as Chairman Cope and Director Krause went into already, so we have had really good years in higher education funding. 4 straight years of fantastic growth, leading the South last year in appropriation growth. However, we do know that the good times don't always last. This is how appropriations have changed over the last 40 years or so. And I know it's hard to see the 0% line there, but occasionally we do have declines in appropriations that fall below that 0%, the last one being the Great Recession. We did have some support from the federal government during that time, so we as a higher ed system did not experience that substantial of a decline, but the truth is every 5 to 10 years or so, we as a state do have declines in appropriations. So how will institutions respond to that? When we talked with Treasurer Lillard about this, he did say, there's more than just recessions that could bring on financial stress. Enrollment declines. Changes perhaps in Title IV, which is financial aid funding at the federal level. If they change loans or Pell Grants, how will that impact stress? So we did zero in on state appropriations as a good tool, but thinking of stress overall beyond just state appropriations and recessions. As Director Krause said, how do institutions respond without leaning so heavily on tuition? Because student affordability is very important to us. And we also use this as an opportunity to learn more about how the state can help institutions plan and weather during the downturn. We did focus on one particular financial metric that is used throughout higher education. It is a KPMG tool called the Consumer Financial Index, and I talked to you about this at the last commission meeting. That is a range from -4 to 10 that is comprised of 4 different ratios that look at, for instance, how much institutional reserves you have on hand, your ability to cover debt, are you performing on your net assets better than you were last year, and your net operating revenue. These are 4 ratios that do comprise this ratio, the Composite Financial Index. And to every institution already in Tennessee, every institution, along with their governing board, who is charged with maintaining the fiduciary responsibility of the institutions, do already rely on Composite Financial Index as a strong indication of health. Just so you know, a score below a 1 typically in the public sector is when institutions should be concerned about their financial health. Between 1 and 3 is where you'll typically find many public institutions. Above a 3 is a very strong financial health. So what do we do? And I know this slide is also probably hard to see in this room, but what we asked every institution was to provide for us their CFIs under 3 different scenarios: a 2% decline in appropriation, a 5% decline in appropriation, and a 10% decline in state appropriation, which is certainly on the extreme side of stress. We then asked each institution to provide us 3 trend years of their CFIs, as well as what their CFIs would look like under each of those scenarios. What I'm showing you here is of our 8 governing boards, the maximum, median, and minimum CFI scores by institution. The first 3 years are the solid lines. Those are actual, what happened from fiscal year 15 through 17. And then the dotted lines are under the 2%, 5%, 10% decline. What we see, as Director Krause already pointed out, we do have 1 or 2 institutions already who are at that line and who know that, and before the stress test have been addressing this. This is not news to them, but it was news to us. It helps us plan for the future. Most of our institutions, however, fell above 2, and a couple were above 3. Under a 2% scenario, there's not substantial decline in stress. You do have all institutions by definition will decline in CFI, but it's not until the 5 and then the 10% decline when you start to see more of the governing boards falling, certainly below 2, and then a few below 1. The next step in the process was to ask targeted questions, specifically on one particular scenario, and that's the 5% scenario. We wanted to zero in on one that was more probable than, say, 10%, and perhaps more stressful than that 2% ratio. So asking institutions, all right, at a 5% decline, and let's say that 5% decline is sustained over a couple of years. So you can't just rely on the next appropriation cycle to have an increase. How will your institution respond? First of all, what will that do to the education operations on your campus? How will that impact your mission, your goals? What will your institutions do to rectify the decline in financial health without leaning heavily on student tuition? And then 3, are there policies and procedures at the state level that can better help institutions plan and weather against that decline? So a month ago, we brought all the CFOs together, and we had this discussion. Some quick takeaways, and I'll just land on a couple per slide. What's at stake with these declines at a 5% level? We can expect to see course bottlenecks, perhaps fewer courses options offered each semester where students may have difficulty getting the courses they need to graduate on time. That is certainly a possibility. Lessened student support services, what you might hear as wraparound services, academic coaches, success coaches, academic advisors, those parallel to the faculty stream support services that help students stay on track. we can expect to see some declines there. And of course, loss of scholarship, the inability to attract staff or retain high-quality staff is a potential. What will institutions do in response to this decline? None of these should be too surprising, but the fact that they've been already thinking through this and have been thinking through this for years is very helpful and indicative of good processes at these institutions. Potential reductions in force, maybe leaning more heavily on volunteer buyout of those faculty or staff who might be close to retirement. A reliance on external funding that's not tuition and appropriations, perhaps more reliance on fundraising or more reliance on research grants. Institutions, how they phrase this is, we are already doing this. We would need to invest more in these if we can, given the financial circumstances. There might be increased class sizes, or as faculty tenure lines go empty, to replace those tenured faculty who've already gone on with adjunct professors instead. And then state policies. What can the state do to help institutions? We do have some mandated expenditures that are either funded fully and really restrict state appropriations or are not funded fully. Number one being the tuition discount waiver programs. We have many tuition discount and waiver programs for instance, state employees, dependents of state employees, etc. That costs higher education $20 million a year. And the state reimburses higher education at about $2.5 million per year. So that is something that is not fully funded through that program, and that certainly came up in our discussions. A general stance on institutional reserves. A big part of the composite financial index is that where institutions will score better is if they have reserves on hand to weather the downturns. We at the state always ask institutions, what are these reserves for? How come you're not investing these already when you can? And I think just having a general discussion and understanding that reserves can help weather and help institutions through that downturn. So how can we encourage and incentivize that when needed? Key takeaways, and Director Krause hit on most of these. Again, I can't stress too much about how institutions are already thinking through this, but to bring everyone into our THEC boardroom in our offices and have all the CFOs talking and thinking through this, it was powerful. It was powerful where we guided, the fiscal team guided the conversation for a little bit, but then we were just silent for about an hour straight as the CFOs talked through strategies, and Treasurer Lillard as well gave some advice and some support and asked some questions, probing questions. This was something that we found useful, and we know our CFOs found useful to actually come together and talk through. This is something that we were also talking about, was about how perhaps we might have more focus on support services. We do not want to lose that in a downturn. What can we do now to invest in perhaps automated services? Other institutions are already thinking through this already. But in sum, having this conversation, this is not something that's happening at coordinating boards across the country. A white paper came out just last week talking about how this is important. We're happy to be leading the way, and we thank Treasurer Lillard for encouraging us to do so. And I thank all the CFOs who participated. Thank you.
A second, let's make sure. Do we have any questions for Stephen? Commissioner Coben?
I am. Stephen, first, let me say thank you for the chance to sit down with you and staff and go through this information. I'm very encouraged about the fact that our schools all take a good long look at this already and have for many years. I'm not a bit surprised about that. I'm proud of them. I'm also thrilled that staff and the institutions are working together on it. One thing I failed to ask when you and I were talking about it is, do we issue a guideline to the institutions on the amount of reserves they would keep? Okay, we do issue a guideline on that?
No, ma'am. That's something that came out of the meeting. Okay. Was could there be perhaps some agreed upon level or something that we recommend that we put out there as guidelines? It's not something that we have leaned on in the past, but that is a takeaway from that meeting.
I think it's really great that staff and the representatives from the schools got together on this. And as a commissioner, I appreciate all the work you did.
Thank you.
Other questions for Stephen? Stephen, thanks so much.
Right.
That was great.
Thank you,
Thank you. Mike, did you have anything else you wanted to add, or is that? That's complete, sir. All right, very good. Next item on the agenda, institutional reports. Chancellor Tidings. Morning.
Executive Director and Chair, members of the Commission, thank you for allowing me to be here with you today. I also would like to, first of all, extend our congratulations and thanks to Dr. DiPietro. He has been a true friend to TBR. He has helped us in many ways. He has helped us with 70 pathways that we now have with the UT system. Because of his leadership and the work that he's done with his staff, he's made that a much easier process for us. Also, I'd like to say congratulations and thank you for the business processes that you put in, because you've become a model for all of us to follow. So thank you again for that. We're going to truly miss you. I would like to update you on some of our fall enrollment and reconnect numbers. You've heard Director Krause give you our reconnect numbers. Our fall enrollment for our community colleges this year was at 89,000 students for our community colleges. For TCATs, we're right at 16,000 students, again making us the largest higher education system within the state. We're really excited about this. This is the third consecutive year of increase since the enrollment declined after the recession. Pellissippi State remains our largest community college with 10,894 students, followed by Southwest with 9,347 and Volunteer State with 9,154. Significantly, our adult enrollment in the community colleges is up by 17%. We know that is as a result of Reconnect, and we're extremely excited about those adults returning to our colleges. This is the first time we have had an increase in our adult enrollment since the recession. This includes those 14,000 Reconnect students that we talked about. And it also shows with our awards and graduation rates that were given. Our community colleges awarded a total of 15,240 degrees and certificates during the 17-18 academic year. That is an 8% increase over the previous year, but more importantly, it is an 82% increase over the 10 years that we've been doing this work. And our 3-year graduation rate at our community colleges has increased by 10.1 percentage points since 2013. Now, I want to remind everyone that that is tracking the first-time full-time freshmen, or as what is referred to as the IPEDS report. And as you all know, first-time full-time freshmen are not the majority of the students that are in the community colleges. So when we talk about an increase in that population, we know that we've had a significant increase in our population across the board. We are also well underway with bringing all 27 of our TCATs into our Shared Services Initiative. This has been an ongoing process over the last 2 years, whereby we are working diligently to have all TCATs operating under the same business model out of the system office, bringing standardization to that process. We also are in the process of bringing our 13 community colleges into a banner MEP environment, again for streamlining utilization of what we're doing with a systemic structure to it, so that we can pull these reports at a system level. All data will now be fed into the banner MEP environment. This has been a very long and arduous process, and one that the state funded, so we're extremely proud to be saying we've made great headway in this endeavor. We have 2 open presidential searches underway. I'm happy to report that we have named the finalists for the president of Northeast State. The board will vote on this next week, and on Monday I will name the finalists for TCAT Knoxville. So stay tuned for that, a big announcement on Monday. We also just completed our second class of Tennessee-trained graduates. We now have a total of 117 individuals across the state of Tennessee who have gone through this training. And if you remember, I presented to you last year that this is a program that was developed by the Tennessee ECD, TBR, and Labor in order to make sure that when someone goes out to recruit a prospect anywhere in the state, we are all talking the same language. We now have teams in place so that the minute a company begins to look at Tennessee, the alarm goes off, people are mobilized, and they know exactly what they need to do, who needs to be called, and the prototype that they need to use. This is a 3-month training session. Each cohort includes educators and administrators from campuses, as well as economic development professionals from State Department of ECD, Labor and Workforce, and for the first time this last class had our K-12 partners included in this process. The curriculum provides best practices in the field, giving them a common language and a network of contacts and a toolbox of resources, all with the goal of creating jobs for Tennesseans. The quality of the training in our technical colleges continues to be affirmed by the number of participants that global companies are establishing here in Tennessee. Just last month, THEC selected TCAP Memphis as one of 6 colleges and universities sharing a $2.5 million grant for scholarships supporting the next generation of aviation industry professionals. And last week, Kubota launched its new partnership with TCAT Elizabethton for a certification training program to prepare graduates for employment as Kubota technicians. Kubota has more than 1,100 dealers across the U.S., and Elizabethton will be one of only 4 certification centers that the nation will be using for this training. Last month, Subaru announced a training partnership with TCAT Elizabethton where students will be paired with sponsoring Subaru retailers that will provide paid, on-the-job experience as well as full-time positions right after graduation. The program can be completed in 20 months. Again, we are one of a handful across the nation that are doing this for that company. And as you know, this fall we launched our TBR warranty claim on all of our technical college graduates. If within their first year of graduation an employer says they do not have the skills for which we say we have trained them, we will begin taking them back and retraining them for free. Those guarantees and warranties will go out with this class upon graduation in December, so we're anxious to see if we get any back. In conclusion, I do want to thank you for all that you've done. I want to thank the director and THEC for the budget that they have put forward on our behalf. We're excited that we were able to continue with the initiatives that we've put forward. We appreciate all the support that you've given to us, and we look forward to a great year beginning. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Chancellor Tidings. Let me make sure, Chancellor Tidings, that there aren't any questions. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, Dr. DiPietro.
So good morning. To begin with, thank you for all the accolades. They're hard for me to accept because the reality is I couldn't do this without a team. And the team that we've put in place at the University of Tennessee deserves a lot of credit. Many of them are here today. If you'll stand up, if you came over with me today, I'd love to acknowledge the fact that you were very important to where we are and what we've achieved together. Thank you. You know, this is a pretty melancholy moment, and I hope you give me a large measure of personal privilege, but I'll tell you that I got into this business by default. You know, I actually loved working on horses as a veterinarian, and from time to time this job isn't much different because, you know, the reality is, you know, most of you don't know this, I was an obstetrician for a horse. So, Mr. Mayor, about 6 hours of a day when I was a clinician for nearly 20 years, I was at the south end of a female horse-headed north, or a mare. And from time to time, this job isn't much different. It's just a different kind coming through the door from the standpoint of a horse's ass. But it doesn't happen very often. But I would tell you that I wanted to update you on a few things that have happened before I get too melancholy. But the reality is, you know, this university's in a really good spot. We've just had our recent board meeting with the current board as opposed to the former board, and they're really, really engaged. And we tackled some issues with them that really demonstrates the fact that they've rolled up their sleeves and they're very, very engaged. We did put in place routine post-tenure review at the University of Tennessee collectively across the system, and they endorsed the policy we've developed, which will mean that all faculty, once they achieve tenure, will be reviewed on a 6-year basis with a committee structure reviewing each of these faculty to look at their performance over that 6-year time frame. And that will become a routine practice at the University of Tennessee, which about half of our peers do that. It causes some anxiety among faculty, having been one, but the reality is I feel it's a best practice and it's good for the University of Tennessee, and it makes sure that our resources and our performance are allocated in an appropriate fashion, and it's a great check and balance. In addition, we actually had the board at the Finance Committee. It's interesting that Stephen got up and talked about the financial stress test. Take a look at our reserve funds and our policies around reserve funds or renewal and replacement dollars. I would agree with his analysis from the standpoint that sooner or later we're going to get into a financial set of circumstances or difficulty that will make life less easy for higher education. But you always have to be ready, and we're positioned to be ready at the University of Tennessee. So, I think the board is new, and the other things that are happening, obviously there's a presidential transition coming up, and the one with Mr. Boyd, with Randy, has been fantastic. He learned a great deal in his time working with state government and with this organization, THEC. And we've been meeting every 2 weeks since the board, 1 or 2 times a week for 2 hours, not every 2 weeks, to talk about the transition and to get him up to speed with where the university is, as well as he's out there day in, day out almost, visiting campuses or institutes frequently, as well as the vice presidents on my team and other folks about the University of Tennessee. So I'm looking forward to a smooth transition to his leadership here in a week or two, and I'm sure that he'll accelerate out of the blocks just like the marathoner he is. And he's definitely ready to jump in and be engaged and continue to move the institution forward. He has agreed with me that it would be prudent to start the search for the chancellor's job at Knoxville, and he will be initiating that shortly after he takes office, with the hope of having a new chancellor for UT Knoxville, a permanent chancellor. Wayne Davis has done a great job, who's a former dean of engineering there. We owe him a debt of gratitude. I was able to pull him out of retirement, and he's spending another year with Knoxville in a leadership role. Has done a great job while in the interim role, so that Wayne can eventually retire next summer is the plan. So it's really a time of reflection for me after 8 years of being in this job. And I would tell you that I think it's healthy to have change in these offices somewhere between 8 and 12 years. It's always been sort of, when I took the first big administrative job at the University of Florida, as dean, I actually thought somewhere between 8 and 12 years is the right number, and in about 9.5 years, I made a move that was one of the best I've ever made to come to Tennessee. This has been a great ride. It really has. And then, after 4 or 5 years with the Agricultural Institute as chancellor, I had the privilege to get this job, and I would tell you that it was a very, very narrow margin. If you watched elections last night or returns, I came in on 11-10 vote. And by the grace of God, I got the job, because there were moments as I watched it, I could not go to the board meeting and sit there and watch them vote, but I watched it from my office. And there was a moment where I thought, this isn't going to happen. And then a vote that I would have never, ever thought would come toward me did. And I won the doggone thing. And it's really been a privilege to serve. But I think that the key here is I'm most proud of the accomplishments we've achieved on my watch. Some of that is the relationship I've had with this organization as well as TBR. Chancellor Tidings has been great. Chancellor Morgan was great to work with as well. But the ability to say it's all about higher education. It doesn't matter whether it's TBR, the local government institutions. It's about what's best for Tennessee. And so those relationships have been terribly, terribly important. So I leave the place in really good financial shape. I'm proud of that, because if you recall, 3 or 4 years ago, we got into a circumstance where I got concerned about raising tuition some 8, 10, 12%. And we very much decided as collectively as a group, as well as my decision to say we need to figure out how to be sustainable in our budget, how to look down the road and project what kind of trouble we're going to be in if we don't do something. And we, from the standpoint of trying, if we kept tuition low, increases at the HEPI rate, if our other auxiliary activities and others grew by the extent of inflation from the standpoint of revenue, and we didn't receive any additional funding from the state, where do we land in 2025? And we land $377 million in a single year underwater. We've been able to achieve all that gap as I leave, so that right now, as long as that model continues, well, we're in a good spot. A lot of that has to do with our hard work, but it also has been the help of this board, as well as the General Assembly, and particularly Governor Haslam and our Finance Commissioner and others, the other constitutional officers, in appropriating at breakneck speed to higher education in the state. So we went into the depths of the Great Recession, my second year in the job, and our revenues on state appropriation side dropped off a cliff 25%. And over the last 7 consecutive years, we've seen increases in appropriations, now turned that corner, and we're above zero. We're 13% above where we were before we went into the recession. About $165 million in new state appropriations over the last 7 years. That helped us close this gap. But then us becoming more effective and efficient, us figuring out how to close the gap further, has solidified the fact that the institution currently, if everything keeps moving along right as it should, and hopefully the economy stays strong, will not be in deep, deep trouble in 2025. And then top it off, record low tuitions increases from the standpoint of what we've done at the undergraduate level, with 2 zeros this past year, or freezes, and below 3% for the last 4 years consecutively running. We've grown enrollment as well, and I've got an enrollment report for this fall for you. If you look at the undergraduate enrollment across the system, it's up 2.2%. At Knoxville, it's up the equivalent amount, 2.2. At Chattanooga, it's up a tick at 0.2%. And at Martin, it's up 5.4% in undergraduate enrollment. In a time frame where you need to realize, I think you do, that it's often the case that enrollment declines. And so to grow enrollment even at 2 or 3% is a great accomplishment that we're very proud of. If you look at graduation rates, they've gone up, as well as, more importantly, retention rates average 81%. Across the system, first year, from freshman to sophomore year. We've done record building. I think this is the second month this month that I didn't have to appear at the Building Commission. That's how many projects we've had over the last 8 years. Over 11 million square feet of either new buildings or renovations across the UT system. About half of the projects financially occurred at Knoxville. About a little over $2 billion in monies that were expended for the opportunity to build new facilities. Of those, we received no small parcel, about $730 million from the state, and the rest of it we found either through donors or other funds that we had available and were able to secure. So we have a new physical plant, more or less. The place is in much better shape than I got it from the standpoint of the physical plant, and the allocation of maintenance monies by this organization, as well as the General Assembly and the governor, have been helpful in getting our buildings back into shape as well. We had a record fundraising year this past year at just under $400 million in gifts, bequests, and pledges. To give you an idea of what we hope to do, by 2020, we had hoped to raise steady state $200 million a year, and this past year we were at just a tick under, at $397 million this past year. On top of it, those of you who've never been a college dean, you probably don't appreciate how hard it is to name a college and to get a gift of the magnitude that names a college. We had no named colleges when I came on board. We now have 4 of them. The Rollins College at Chattanooga is the latest one, a $40 million gift. the Herbert College of Agriculture at Knoxville at $35 million, and then the Haslam College of Business, as well as the Tickle College of Engineering, which were a little bit earlier in the time frame. That's unheard of. I worked like a dog, frankly, as a dean, trying to get somebody to give me a big gift to name our college for 9.5 years, and it didn't happen. And the other thing about these donors that gave these gifts is they didn't structure the gift in a way that ties the hands of the chief executive officer or the administration. In most cases, they said, we want you to accomplish these goals with these monies, as opposed to saying, hire 5 distinguished professors, or, give out half of the endowment in scholarships. We want you to tackle these goals and get to this point, but we want you to have the flexibility, which is a great, great deal, to know what the organization needs as its leader and your leadership team to get it where it needs to go. And then the Oak Ridge relationship's never been stronger. We're facing the possibility of a recompete coming up pretty soon. We should know probably the next few months. But that relationship has really blossomed in the last 8 years. We now have over 200 jointly appointed faculty between the university and Oak Ridge National Lab. We have 130 students in a PhD program that we've put together named after Governor Bredesen, the Bredesen Center. Expanded it to big data sciences from engineering and energy sciences a couple of years ago. Again, the help of the General Assembly with one-time money, and the governor's office helped us with that. And the relationship's never been stronger. And the other thing, too, is that UT is a true partner now as a co-contractor with Patel in operating the lab. That wasn't the case to the same degree and extent 8 years ago. I'd be remiss if I didn't thank the Board of Trustees, both the former board and the current board that we've worked with. Much of my success is a result of them. Much of my success from the standpoint of some of the ideas we've pulled off has been because they've challenged me to do it. And I think that's really healthy. And I believe the transparency that the new board exists under from the standpoint of the kinds of conversations they have is really healthy. But the former board needs to be given accolades for pushing us in that direction as well. And the faculty and staff and students of the place, on top of it, we couldn't have done what we did without them. I mean, they're the people who get the work done, work hard to get a degree, work hard to be in our classrooms, or keep the lights on and the water running. So as I look at this university system and I would categorize all the other universities in this category too in our state, the publics as well as the privates. Universities do things all the time that make Tennessee better. And it cannot really be measured by all those things I just talked about, whether it be graduation rates, financial statistics, or other statistics. Really, what great universities do is they improve lives, the opportunities and the hope of future generations each and every day. And it's truly a privilege to work at a place like UT and to work in Tennessee. And that's what really matters, and that's what gets Joe up in the morning and says, it's time to go to work again. And, I'd hope you would believe that we've brought stability and trust back to the office of the president on my watch, and that we leave the institution much better than I found it, which I'm proud of, and positioned for even greater things for President Boyd and the team we've put together to continue to just rock it out of those blocks and keep doing it for the citizens, the students, the state, and beyond. And you really know when it's time, and it's time for me. And if you'll just give me one more minute of personal privilege, I would tell you that this is probably the icing on the cake for why Joe's decided to leave right now. And it's not because we have a new governor or a new General Assembly or any of those things, or a new board. It's because a few months ago, actually longer than that, probably 8 or 10 months ago, I was in Illinois. We have a 9-year-old granddaughter there. Her name's Abigail. She's horse crazy. And so when I'm up there having liked horses and worked around them since I was a kid, I take her to riding lessons. And I took her to riding lessons one night, and we got done, and one of the things you do at that facility, which I think is great, is you just don't hand your horse to a handler or a groomsman, you groom the horse. And she said to me, she was riding a big thoroughbred horse, she's really doing great, and I'm really proud of her, named Champ, and she said, Champ's anxious, Papa Joe, Champ is anxious about his feet, and I've got to pick his feet out. Can you help me with that? And I said, Abigail, for sure. So I got a hoof pick, and I showed her how to pick out the horse's foot on the left side. I talk her through the right side of the horse, and she looks up at me with her big blue eyes, and she said, where did you learn that? And I said, well, Abby, you know, I'm a veterinarian. I worked on horses for 20 years. And she said, oh, really? I thought you were nothing but the president. So when those kinds of things happen, and you want to be able to retire and help your granddaughter learn how to ride horses and handle horses and other things with the rest of those kiddos, you know it's time. And while it's bittersweet, because I love the people of Tennessee and I love the institution I've had the privilege of leading, you know, it's time for me to focus on family now as opposed to work. And it's time they get me back before I can't bend over and pick up a horse's foot. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Questions for Dr. DiPietro? Commissioner Roach?
I have no questions. I just want to say thank you for everything. And while you may not have gotten choked up, I did. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr.
Nice
DiPietro.
to-
Thank you. President White, you get to follow that up.
Mr. Chairman, while Dr. White approaches the podium, I always like to take a moment to thank our presidents that are here today, Dr. Glover, Dr. Oldham, and Dr. White, of course, from the LGIs. We never take for granted how busy you all are, so the fact you chose to be here with us today is greatly appreciated. And I do pass on regrets directly from Dr. Noland, who called to tell me I won't be here, but Jeremy and Mike Koff will be. And so I know they're well represented. Also, Alan from the MTSU team is here, and Dr. Weddle West, along with Ted Townsend and Raj from Memphis. So grateful to all our LGIs for your support and attendance at the meetings.
That's right. Thank you. President White.
Well, thank you, President DiPietro, for taking care of my alma mater. I do appreciate your work. And following you is a little bit reminiscent of homecoming. In our homecoming parade this year, my husband and I followed Landry Ergel, a little girl with a genetic health issue for whom life is very difficult, but is one of our wonderful members of our community. And I was between her and Miss Austin P. with a puppy. And so I can't compete with grandchildren or horses. But I appreciate the opportunity to represent the LGIs today, and we decided to focus our remarks on the contributions that the LGIs make to the economy, the economic development in Tennessee and our regional areas. So I'll start with the University of Memphis. And University of Memphis is a direct contributor to regional economic development in several ways. Their research foundation operates a wholly owned subsidiary company called UMRF Ventures Incorporated. And that purpose is to partner with regional corporations to bring well-paying student jobs to campus. This is significant because they're reversing the flow of jobs that in the past have been outsourced out of the area and providing students opportunities for growth and professionalism. So the company operates multiple inbound and outbound IT call centers and a systems analytics command center, and that is completely staffed by Memphis students. And so just last week, this effort won a 2018 award for Regional Economic Development and Innovation from the American Association for State Colleges and Universities. In fact, President Nolan and I were there when they got that award. The University of Memphis also operates the Cruz Center for Entrepreneurship on campus to stimulate student entrepreneurship, and they provide startup support and seed funding for new ventures created by students. In addition, the university operates the THEC Institute of Technology as an applied innovation hub. And so that institute has attracted several technology companies from outside the region to set up in the university district to work with Memphis faculty and students. So let's go to Northeast Tennessee, where East Tennessee State University has leveraged its expertise in healthcare to address specific healthcare challenges in that region. Two of the biggest healthcare systems in the area recently merged to form Ballad Health. Ballad Health is making significant investments, in fact, $85 million toward academics and research to educate and train healthcare workers that frankly are in short supply in that region. So ETSU, in collaboration with Ballad Health, will be conducting research focused on healthcare challenges in that region, and then they will also partner to execute cluster hires. And so those hires are hiring multiple scholars at one time so that they can come in and work collaboratively on research projects, and they can get a lot of leverage and some quick results that way. Approaching its second decade of operation, ETSU's Innovation Laboratory is a high-tech business incubator that assists aspiring entrepreneurs in the area to develop their ideas from concept to commercialization. That lab offers wet and dry space, lab space, office space, and an entrepreneur resource center, meeting rooms, and an innovation studio. The lab has earned a soft landings designation from the International Business Innovation Association. That recognizes the incubator for having specialized programs and facilities available to help international companies come into new markets. Only 20 business incubators worldwide hold that prestigious designation. On the Cumberland Plateau, Tennessee Tech has partnered with the local community and the state to boost local economic development efforts to help secure more than 3,000 jobs for the Cookeville-Putnam County area. And last year, the Science Applications International Corporation, or SAIC, opened its Cookeville operations, the Technology Integration Gateway. The facility plans to add 300 IT professionals to its roster over the next 3 to 5 years, expanding SAIC's footprint in Tennessee to 900. Tech played an integral part on Putnam County's economic development team, and President Phil Oldham and Tech led efforts to work with SAIC on a building, continued education needed for SAIC employees, and degree requirements for the graduates the company is hiring. And I'll say that all of us participate in those activities. Very often when a company's looking at moving into the area, they want to meet with university and college administration and provost and find out what advances are available in the area and what the workforce is like in the area before they will come in. Academy Sports Plus Outdoors built a 1.6 million square foot distribution center in Cookeville, and that's the state's largest under one roof. That company expects to reach 700 employees there in the next couple of years, and a large number of those are Tech alumni. Securing the distribution center was a long-term project, and Tennessee Tech was intimately involved in recruiting that company. So in the middle part of the state, Middle Tennessee State University serves as the headquarters for the statewide Tennessee Small Business Development Center program. So a number of us have smaller offices on our campus, but they are all coordinated through MTSU. The center serves as a network for professional business consultants by providing expert business advice to all types of businesses, along with maintaining an international trade center. In addition, MTSU has a business and economic research center that tracks economic activity in Middle Tennessee, providing research to clients in areas such as government, the private sector, and not-for-profit organizations. The publications and presentations they provide keep the public informed about economic activity and economic impact in the area. Also, the Corporate Partnerships Office at MTSU partners with local chambers of commerce to help recruit new businesses and industries. And now to Austin Peay, which, by the way, I'll just announce this. We just learned yesterday we have an enrollment record this year, 10,971, or a 4.9% increase overall. And thank you, Provost Gandy, who led that charge. That's amazing work. So the commercial's over. Austin Peay recently held an industry summit to increase communication and collaboration among industry, educators, and the military. The goal of the industry summit was to showcase available educational opportunities offered by Austin Peay, as well as our community college and technical college partners and to start a conversation among key stakeholders to facilitate community solutions. So at that summit, we had county and city officials, representatives from the military, Fort Campbell primarily, local business owners, and national and regional representatives from LG, who is moving into the area, and Google, building a data center in Clarksville, and Hankook, one of our major tire companies. So since then, discussions have been held on new initiatives and workforce-ready programs that can serve the industry in the Clarksville-Montgomery County area. And I want to introduce a member of my team who's spearheading this effort for us. So Lieutenant General Ron Bailey, there in the back, if you'll wave. Lieutenant General Bailey is an Austin Peay alum, retired a year ago as a 3-star Marine General, and is our Vice President for External Affairs. And so he's leading this effort on our campus along with our Dean of STEM. So in addition to convening stakeholders to devise collaborative solutions, Austin Peay is filling a direct need by providing foreign language programs to serve international companies coming into the Clarksville, Montgomery County area. Now, most of our universities offer foreign language programs, but we're working specifically with these Korean and Japanese companies because they're interested in more of their employees and their families coming over and learning English, and they're interested in their employees that they hire in the area to learn Korean or Japanese, and then also to gain cultural competencies that will help them to reach their workforce needs. So this year we partnered with Clarksville Montgomery County School System to develop a Korean language program, and 45 students are enrolled either at Austin Peay or in a dual enrollment program at a local high school. LG and Hankook also have expressed interest in our offering other specialized courses. They were on campus this weekend at the game, and we're exploring that now. Austin Peay has a Japanese language program that in the last 4 years has enrolled more than 350 students. To assist Japanese companies in the area, we've held business workshops for them, cultural events, and diplomatic talks. And in order to better coordinate these efforts, Austin Peay partnered with the Japan Foundation to bring in a Japan Outreach Initiative coordinator from Japan to strengthen the relationships between the university, Japanese industries, and the Japanese consulate in Nashville. That coordinator resides on our campus and has a 2-year appointment. So, as a public land-grant institution, Tennessee State University operates entrepreneurship and incubator centers and has a recognized extension program that impacts the entire state of Tennessee. You can see that each LGI is making important contributions to the state's economic success. Those I've shared with you today are just a few examples, and they highlight not only the impact they have on the state, but they also reflect the individual missions, capacity, and workforce partners, depending on where they're located in the state. Many communities have land. Many have tax incentives and other characteristics to help recruit companies to Tennessee. But the real difference for the LGI communities is that there is a university present that can help generate a skilled talent pool for these companies, that can serve as an innovation hub, and can also that also provides expert faculty to conduct groundbreaking research in industry matters important to Tennessee. And so our institutions are committed to being productive stewards of place. That concludes my remarks.
Thank you, President White. Any questions? Thanks very much. Thank you. Okay, we are now in the action item section of the agenda. The first item in this section is post-secondary education authorization items. Dr. Beller-Chase.
Thank you, Chairman Cope, Director Krause, members of the Commission. Good morning. I actually have one informational item and one action item for you today. We've had a recent closure. There's been a couple press releases, and so I just wanted to give you a little background and give you an opportunity to ask any questions that you may have. So Fountainhead College of Technology announced its closure on October 30th, and it was effective October 31st. They were actually authorized by the Commission since 1976. There's a Fountainhead College of Technology closure webpage on THEC's website. So on Fountainhead website, you go and there's a link to THEC. And on THEC, we have a whole page for them about information and resources and comparable programs and so forth, and of course our contact information. So we are working with Fountainhead. We will be receiving the transcripts for the students because statute requires us to act as a repository. So we have been in contact with them, and we are continuing to work with them. There were approximately 50 students in five programs, either associate or bachelor's, when the institution closed, and the institution projected that 11 of those students would have graduated at the end of the fall semester in December. So, in the purpose of all that, Steve South from South College, he contacted our office on November 1st, and he said that he wanted to help these students finish the semester. So he was in contact with Richard Rackley, who was the owner of Fountainhead, and they came up with a plan. It was a future tense, we might, but as of yesterday, South College sent out a press release. And basically what they're going to do is they're going to allow the students to use their facilities for instruction, and they're going to pay the instructors from Fountainhead to continue the semester so those 11 students can graduate. After that, any of the students that are interested, their credits will be evaluated and they may be admitted into South College. And South College does, they provide degrees that are comparable to Fountainhead. Another option that students may have, if they receive Title IV funding, then they could get a loan discharge for 100% of their loans because of the way the closure was done. But if they do that, none of their credits would transfer, so they would essentially lose all the time and credits that they gained. The last resource would be the Tuition Guarantee Fund that we have here in Tennessee, which is here to reimburse students for unearned tuition or help with teach outs. So there's a lot of options for the students, a lot of things on the table. South College plans to start this program on Monday, November 12th. So I will take any questions that you may have about the closure.
Questions? Okay.
Okay. So my action item today is one action item with 4 components. The Committee on Post-Secondary Educational Institutions has recommended the approval of all the components. Component 1 is reauthorization. It has been recommended that the institutions listed in Section 1A be granted reauthorization for the period of January 1st, 2019 to December 31st, 2019 as follows. 41 institutions for regular authorization, 1 for temporary authorization, and 4 institutions for conditional authorization. The reasons for and conditions of the conditional authorizations are listed in your material. Component 2 and 3, initial authorization and new programs. It's been recommended that the 3 institutions listed in Section 1B and the 19 new programs listed in Section 1C be granted temporary authorization and approval, respectively. And lastly, Component 4, optional expedited authorization. There are 46 institutions in Section 1D, and it's recommended they be granted optional expedited authorization.
Great. Any questions? If not, yes, sir. Commissioner Stafford.
How do we do this? I need to choose
Mayor Wharton.
on St. Jude. So how do you?
Well,
doing it separately? How do you
I think, yeah, we should just peel that off as a second item.
number 30? I move that we vote on item number 31, number 31 out of item 1A, and vote on that separate. That's the motion.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second? Mayor Wharton's motion. This is a motion to amend the consideration of this item. So what we're actually doing is we're altering the agenda slightly. We need to do that first by considering Mayor Wharton's motion before we actually vote on that. So to Mayor Wharton's motion to modify the agenda as stated, is there a second?
Second.
Have a second from Commissioner Coben. All in favor signify so by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. The agenda is modified per the motion. Now, I think just for clarity's purposes, unless there's an objection, let's take the agenda item that Mayor Wharton just mentioned consideration of, and we will understand that the record will reflect, Mayor Wharton, you are recusing yourself from this vote. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, very good. Then with respect to the item before, the floor is open. You've heard the recommendation of staff, and I will entertain a motion to adopt the recommendation. I have a motion. Comptroller Wilson made the motion. Is there a second? Commissioner
Second.
Winton with the second. All in favor signify so by saying aye. Are there any opposed? Motion carries. Now we'll go back to the items, so we'll be voting on the balance of the items. You've heard the recommendation of staff. I'll entertain a motion to adopt the recommendation. I have a motion from Commissioner Dishner. Is there a second? Second from Comptroller Wilson. Any discussion? All in favor signify so by saying aye. Are there any opposed? Motion carries. Very good. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, in regards to our post-secondary authorization division, a few different commission members at various times have asked for really a deeper dive into the regulatory work that our agency does, and so please look for that in January. We will do a deep dive into the work of DPSA and let Dr. Bellerchase and Julie Woodruff explain to you what that day-to-day work looks like. And then I'd also anticipate we have really two other regulatory arms that you don't hear a lot about. One, veteran education, and our financial aid compliance division. So look for that as information items in January. And I hope a good discussion around one of our core functions is as a regulator.
Very good. Thank you. All right, Dr. House.
Good morning. Thank you, Chairman Cope, Director Krause, members of the Commission. What I would like to do just briefly this morning is spotlight a snapshot of what enrollment looks like for this fall 2018 term. These data were collected as of the census date, which is typically the 14th day of each semester. We always have asked the institutions to provide us with this data just so we can see what enrollment looks like before the end of the term. So we typically use end of term data for the purposes of the funding formula, for anything that is funding oriented. For those of you who carry the fact book around with you in your briefcase, which I hope is all of you, that reflects end of term data rather than 14th day data. So really this just gives us a snapshot of what enrollment looks like at the beginning of the term versus the end of the term, which we more often rely on. So the data that were provided to THEC by the institutional research teams, Mike Hoff is here. I don't know if there are any other IR folks here, but thank you to all of you who provide this data to us, does not include the TCATs. So Chancellor Tidings just mentioned that approximately 16,000 students have enrolled in TCATs this fall. These data do not include those students. So just to be transparent about who is included and who is not, the public universities and the community colleges are included in all of these data. So excluding the TCATs, we saw about 222,000 students enroll this semester. If you do include the TCATs per Chancellor Tidings, we have about 237 students enrolled this semester. About 43,000 of those students are first-time freshmen. All of the information that I will provide does not reflect only the first-time freshmen. It reflects everyone who is involved, who is enrolled. Be they first-time freshmen, continuing undergraduate, graduate students. So the numbers that I will present will sound a little bit different from those that Dr. DiPietro just mentioned, that Dr. White just mentioned, because they include everyone, not just undergraduates. This reflects, again, excluding the TCATs, this reflects a 0.8% increase over fall 2017 14th day data. So we very often do rely on the end of term data, but for the purposes of an apples to apples comparison, we are up almost 1% over 14th day enrollment last year. I will present the institution by institution data momentarily, but generally speaking, the increases were the largest at the UT institutions, to Dr. DiPietro's point, followed by the community colleges, and we did see some declines in the LGI space. So I will present 3 of these tables. There's a lot to look at, but just to orient you, fall 17 is the 14th day fall 17 data, so it will look a little bit different from what you see in the fact book and other tables that we present. Fall of 18 is the head count data as of 14th day, which was provided by the institutional research teams at our institutions. And I included both the number change of students and the percent change of students. That is the N and the percent delta that is presented. So these numbers do look a little bit different in terms of the percent change compared to what Dr. DiPietro just presented, but the story is quite similar. UT Knoxville increased the size of their freshman class, which reflects much of this 3% increase, and UT Martin is growing as well. 4.5% year over year. So I understand that when I say an institution's enrollment is flat, that might mean something very different compared to whether if an institution leader were up here saying that 0.3% is not flat, that reflects 30 additional students. So by no means attempting to disagree with the presidents and the leadership, I will say that UT Chattanooga was about flat with an increase of about 0.3%, whereas the other two UT institutions increased pretty substantially. The story is a little bit different for the LGIs, and you can see the variation that exists among the LGIs. The Austin P percent gain is a little bit different from what Dr. White just presented. I think that might be a timing issue related to the Fort Campbell data, perhaps among some others, but we did receive these data before Fort Campbell reported. So if there's a difference beyond that, we can sidebar outside. The biggest mover here is TSU, who is down almost 700 students, about 8% over their enrollment in fall of 17. My understanding is that that is due to some changes in the admission criteria implemented by TSU, as well as some data-related issues in terms of counting students. So beyond TSU being the largest outlier there, the differences in enrollment, 17 to 18, range from essentially flat to down a few percentage points across the board at the LGIs. And much of that difference, the 1.5% across the sector, if you will, is mostly attributable to TSU's decline. I will not steal Mary's thunder. Mary Lappin will present on Reconnect and what Reconnect has done with regard to enrollment in the community colleges, but I do just want to spotlight a few of these institutions. Across the board, for the most part, enrollment is up at our community colleges. You'll notice that Pellissippi is down almost 2%. I believe that is because, and I spoke with our colleagues at TBR, the consensus there is that's because they started the Reconnect initiative last year, so they saw quite a surge in enrollment among adults last year, and they've gone down a little bit there, but that does not reflect a real decline as much as it's just a response to their starting the Reconnect initiative last year. If you look at the enrollment at Cleveland State, that has gone up almost 9%, which is amazing. As well as Dyersburg is up about 5%. Dyersburg has had some struggles in the past, and that uptick in enrollment is really significant and really important to think about. Also, Southwest, we mentioned, is also up almost 3%. So really a very positive story across the community colleges, much of which has to do with the resonating impact of Promise and the new impact of Reconnect that Mary will speak much more about. Something we asked for this year at the 14th day that's a little bit different from what we've requested before from the institutions is a breakdown by race, by socioeconomic status, as well as data about Promise and Reconnect take-up. What we saw was really nothing super exciting or something different from what we've seen in the past. That is that the majority of students who are enrolled who are persons of color, who are non-white students, are primarily enrolled at institutions in the Memphis and Nashville area. And that really just reflects more than anything the demographics of the geography of the state. But to my third bullet, there is much that we can do to continue to engage with these non-white students who are traditionally underrepresented in higher ed, and much of that work has been undertaken through the support from the Lumina Foundation in the form of the TIE grant, which I know we have talked about in various settings prior. The same is true when we think about low-income students. Very often we talk about how low-income students are overrepresented at the community colleges, and I think that is still quite true, but it's not quite as different a rate of enrollment at the community colleges as compared to many of our universities. So I think that's a very intentional conversation to have about what being a Pell-eligible low-income student looks like at a community college versus a university, and how to best support those students, because as I said, we often talk about those students as being overrepresented in one sector, and they're not to the extent that perhaps they've been in the past. We've spoken a little bit about the Spark initiative. I don't want to speak too much more about that, but thinking about students who may be students of color, may be students who are low income, but also have challenges that relate to their geography and where they live in the state. The Spark initiative is really intended to work with those students to make sure they have access to early post-secondary opportunities as well as post-secondary opportunity. So a lot of our conversation about equity is often centered around racial and socioeconomic equity, but something we need to think about as well is geographic equity across our state. Very briefly, to talk about Promise and Reconnect. Promise and Reconnect continue to revolutionize the higher ed landscape in Tennessee, which is just such a point of pride and something that is so wonderful. The proportion of Tennessee Promise students who make up the head count at community colleges range from about 17% to about a third, about 33%, and that number is much higher for first-time freshmen across our campuses. So any student who at any point is flagged as a Promise student will continue to be considered a Promise student moving through, and we can split that out by students who attrit, but also students who are no longer Promise students because they have received aid from other sources, et cetera. So there's a lot more to be done there. There's a lot more we continue to work on there, but Promise really continues to encourage students to enroll, and Promise students make up a large proportion of those in our community colleges. The same is true of Reconnect, and you're going to hear a lot more about that from Mary, so I'll just be very brief on that. The data here are very preliminary. If anyone can hearken back to 2014, 2015, when we began looking at the Promise data, it was a whole new world of data analysis, and that's really where we are with Reconnect at this point. We have the best practices related to Promise in terms of that data work, but we're really trying to navigate the best way to tell the Reconnect story, which Mary will begin to do after following me up here. As we've mentioned in other circumstances, first-time freshmen is really not a great metric for adults. Many adults have attended higher education in the past, did not complete a degree, and now through the Reconnect program are re-engaging with higher ed. So we typically do not use a first-time freshman metric when talking about adult students, but just thinking about the head count, between 12 and 22% of the head count at community colleges this term is comprised of Reconnect students, which is wonderful. Those numbers will continue to evolve. They will continue to change as we really wrap our arms around what Reconnect is doing at the community colleges. So please stay tuned for a lot more on that. And what now in terms of the work that the data team will do related to enrollment? 14th day versus end of term is typically not that different. It's really just a difference in when we receive the data, when the data are locked, and for all intents and purposes audited in terms of enrollment, financial aid distribution, and all of that. So just keeping an eye on whether there's any big difference by institution between the 14th day and the end of term. As always, looking at what persistence looks like, not only through the fall term, because that would reflect the difference in 14th day versus end of term, but what persistence looks like term to term and year to year, as we tend to do. And finally, I mentioned earlier our focus on equity, be it racial, socioeconomic, or geographic, through the interventions that are happening and the programs that are being implemented by the THEC team, the team at TBR, the team at UT, et cetera. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions. I'm also happy to provide any data that would answer any additional questions beyond this presentation, and of course reconcile with all of our colleagues any differences or distinctions in these data points.
Dr. House,
Yes, ma'am.
thank you for your presentation. You know, what I would love to know is what's going on in Northwest Tennessee. I understand, I would imagine the increase in enrollment in Dyersburg of 4.7 is Promise, is Reconnect.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, more than likely, I would assume that's what that is. But Dr. DiPietro, maybe I should have asked this when you were at the microphone. You said a 5.4% increase at UT Martin. Could you tell us, I don't know, the top 3 things or something that UT did at Martin to have that great increase in enrollment? Because I know Martin's been struggling, and that's very good news.
I will hand the mic over to Dr. DiPietro, but I often refer to that as the Keith Carver effect.
That was going to be my number one guess.
You know, Martin has gone through a downturn in enrollment, and Chance Carter's on board, and he's tirelessly recruiting person. I mean, he's got an enrollment management team that Bob Smith, Chance Smith's been in place before he came on to the job, but Keith has really gotten out in the local community. Probably done more civic organization talks and visited more high schools.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you.
I think the other stories that are embedded within this enrollment data the commission should be aware of. One, referencing Chairman Cope, the meeting we went to, there's no state in America sitting around talking about a community college increase right now. Community colleges in America right now are having an enrollment crisis because the economy is so strong. So for the Board of Regents to be doing that in the midst of Tennessee's economy is really remarkable. The other piece on the LGIs, there's some nuance there because I think if you talk to the LGI presidents, what a lot of them would tell you is their freshman class enrollment exploded this year, but they're graduating really big classes. So overall enrollment numbers drop. And in Tennessee, that's not a bad thing because you're going to get paid for those students you just graduated. So I think we view this as an incredibly positive enrollment report, one that any of our contiguous neighbors would really envy as a state.
That's exactly right. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Blakely, when you mentioned Hardeman County, and over the years, we've often received observations or comments that everything's always north of Interstate 40. We're not doing anything in your surroundings and those. You told me of your experience in Hardeman County. Have you been into Hardin and are those? Why is it? It's just an anomaly that everything is north, and that we forget about the folks along those the Alabama, Mississippi.
I think there are some particular challenges, and I will speak for what my personal observations have been in southern middle and southern west Tennessee. I would also say, Mr. Mayor, most counties I visit feel as if they are forgotten counties. When you visit them in the rural areas, they all share a very common sentiment that they feel like as if they've been left behind. The particular challenge that I observed in Wayne County, Hardin County, and Hardeman County, of which we've now visited all of them, is they are competing with the economy right now. The colloquialism that we learned in Wayne County, which I'd never heard before, was working on the boat. When the economy's booming, the Mississippi River provides great jobs for people that want to make $15 to $20 an hour on a barge, with no college obviously required. I think that in these distressed counties, one of our challenges is right now, even though there really hasn't been an economic upturn in those counties per se, there are jobs where you can live good enough. During this time. During the recession, though, all of those jobs are incredibly fragile. And I think that when you worry about those counties feeling left behind, they are a little bit of a higher education deserts, just to be honest. We have centers in many of them. In our defense, I'd say this, and we've had a really particular discussion around one of the counties with Dr. Hamilton. The challenge for the colleges is it has to make sense financially to make a section. And so a lot of these counties, we end up in a little bit of a standoff. The county says, well, we really need higher ed in this county. Typically, you'll find our community college, TCAT, and for that matter, some of the universities are willing to put boots on the ground, but they can't do that for 7 students. They just can't. That is why we are so intrigued with 2 notions. One, what's going on in Lawrenceburg right now with the multi-use higher ed center, and as you all will see later today during Capitol, there is another such center that we are bringing before the commission for consideration. The notion that the way to make this work is not to say X college is going into Hardeman County. What if a center is going into Hardeman County and a variety of colleges could offer courses? Tennessee THEC is in Lawrence County, along with MTSU, Martin Methodist College, TCAT, Hohenwald, etc. I think the multi-use center could go a long way in those rural areas. The second point is just figuring out a better way to use our K-12 facilities, which after 3 p.m. are largely abandoned in Tennessee. So they are completely underutilized places for us to bring higher ed into the counties.
Other questions? Any other comments? Okay, it's 11:30, and at this point, unless there's an objection, we'll recess for lunch. I'm sorry. Oh, I'm so sorry, Mary. Let's talk about reconnect. Sorry. We're all hungry. No, just kidding. Yeah. Thanks,
Right
Mary.
before lunch.
That's all right. Yeah. Sorry about that.
No, it's fine. Thank you, Chairman Cope, Mr. Krause, members of the commission. My name is Mary Lappin. I'm looking forward to sharing an update on Tennessee Reconnect with you today. So the Tennessee Reconnect grant launched on February 15th. In conjunction with that launch, we partnered with the governor's office to launch a $1 million marketing campaign that included commercials, billboards, social media, as well as posters and pushcards, which we shared with our partners across the state. Throughout this campaign, I can't stress the role of partnerships enough. We partnered with the colleges. We partnered with our Tennessee Reconnect communities. We also partnered with our community partners to really bring the opportunity of Tennessee Reconnect to adults where they are, in their workplace, in their community, even at their child's back to school night. We went to where they were to share the opportunity of Tennessee Reconnect. I also want to highlight our partnerships with other state agencies. Tennessee Reconnect has worked with several state agencies, but most recently, we worked with the Department of Human Services. There, we trained over 600 of their Tennessean-facing employees. This include TANF eligibility counselors, this include vocational rehabilitation counselors, also include their child care licensing folks, to train them to be Tennessee Reconnect ambassadors. As Tennessee Reconnect ambassadors, they are trained to have general college-going knowledge and to know about Tennessee Reconnect, but more importantly, they're trained to identify potential reconnectors. They're trained to know to begin that first college conversation, and then to refer folks on to their next step in the college-going process. To date, we've trained over 1,000 Tennessee Reconnect ambassadors across the state with our partner agencies and local partnerships. Between February 15th and September 24th, we received over 33,000 applications. Primarily, our applicants are women in their mid-30s with families. About 40% have college experience. A little over a quarter are currently enrolled. About 28% of our applicants have never been to college before. So to put that in perspective, the Tennessee Reconnect Grant application reached over 9,000 Tennesseans who have never been to college. We are very excited about these numbers, especially because early projections showed 8,000 to 10,000 applications total. It's also worth noting that 86% of our applicants plan to work while they're enrolled, and 57% of them plan to work full-time. Our adults who are using the Tennessee Reconnect Grant are very different from our Tennessee Promise students. Our Tennessee Promise students, in general, though not always, can really make college work, or their life work around college. Our adult learners are working college into their lives. That shift in perspective very much shifts our strategy in supporting our adult learners. An example of this is with our Tennessee Reconnect communities. So within our Tennessee Reconnect communities, we house Tennessee Reconnect navigators who work with our adult learners to help them navigate the college process, but also to work with them to connect them with community partnerships and community resources available to them, things such as child care or transportation assistance, and also to work with them to think about what are those barriers that may impede their college success and strategize on the front end so that they can be successful in earning that degree or credential. We have Tennessee Reconnect ambassadors right now Tennessee Reconnect navigators that are available to every reconnector in each county across the state. So this fall, we welcomed our first class of Tennessee Reconnect grantees. We saw, like I said, 33,258 applications. Of those, 28,808 filled out their FAFSA, and then 23,010 were eligible based on their FAFSA. We then saw 14,962 enroll in college, in our community colleges. I will say that this number is as of September 25th, so as with our promise numbers, it will continue to shift over the next few months as the colleges are reporting their eligibility rates. Also, a shift from promise is our Tennessee Reconnect students do not need to enroll in this fall. They can enroll in the spring or the summer, so we do expect some of these students to be enrolling in the spring, and we'll be anxiously watching for that. Looking at the enrolled student profile, it really remained pretty consistent with the applicant student profile. It's predominantly women in their mid-30s with families who are working. Whoops. I'm trying to get you to lunch. There we go. We found the greatest predictor if a Reconnect applicant would be eligible and enroll is if they're already enrolled. About 50% of our eligible applicants who were not enrolled did enroll. We'll now be focusing on those students who didn't enroll and seeing how we can better support them and how we can better reach them and get them into college and onto that degree or credential. Looking at this map, and I know it's very small, but I'll try to narrate it for you. We can also see that some of the states saw a higher percent of students enroll by county. So this map shows the percentage of Reconnect applicants who went ahead and enrolled. What's important about it, and something that we're looking at closely, is that some of our counties saw a greater matriculation rate than others. As Dr. House mentioned, we saw an over 8% increase in Cleveland State, and that is reflected in this map as well, where we saw Southeast Tennessee saw higher numbers of their applicants enrolling. So we're going to continue to watch these numbers to see where and see what's going on in places like Cleveland State, find those best practices and share them, and think about where there may be areas of opportunity in other places across the state. Whoops. Really trying to get you to lunch, but there we go. Last one. So thinking about our next steps for Tennessee Reconnect, we're going to really continue to be watching the data. We want to learn more about those students who did not enroll, how we can reach them, and how we can support them and get them into college. We'll also continue to work to support our current students and our current applicants. At the community level, we're bringing our Tennessee Reconnect Community Network in-house here at THEC. What that will allow us to do is that we can track each of our support services that's available to each of our reconnectors across the state. And then we can really zero in on some of those best practices that are serving adult learners here in Tennessee. And then we can scale those practices across the state. Some of those practices include college navigation services, FAFSA completion assistance, as well as just reminders of those college deadlines. We'll also continue to work with our colleges to identify some of their promising practices as well as areas of growth. Early data has showed a difference in enrollment patterns across institutions, so we're going to continue to dig into those to really define what they are and also where there's opportunities and, again, some best practices that we want to make sure we're sharing. Furthermore, as I mentioned, our Reconnect grantees do not need to enroll in the spring, do not need to enroll in the fall, so we're really looking forward to seeing our students enroll in the spring as well. And then finally, we'll of course have a very close eye on persistence. Persistence is a little bit trickier with adult students. Some of our students are coming in with just a semester left till they finish their program. Others are just beginning. So we'll also be having a close eye on degree attainment. Thank you very much. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Mary. I've got one, and there are probably some other ones also. Was there anything about the makeup of the applicant pool that surprised you?
It's a great question. I would say, truthfully, the numbers that we got was what surprised me. I think that the applicant pool was similar to what we saw with our Tennessee Reconnect communities in the past. A lot of women with families, the mid-30s range. I was just very pleasantly surprised at the volume of applications that we received.
That's good. Commissioner Stafford.
And a related question. So now that they've been engaged or re-enrolled for a period of time, is there anything you've learned about that population that you didn't know that we need to be aware of going forward? And then second, you talked about the challenges that you're monitoring. What are some of the biggest challenges that we're dealing with right now?
So great question. Great question. So I'll say of what we're learning, we're still really digging into the data. I was in Dr. House's office yesterday. We want to learn more about, especially that group of students who we saw that the students who weren't enrolled and didn't enroll. I want to learn more about them as far as what brought them to us, what made them fill out the application, and where did we lose them. So we really want to zero in on that. I'll say from our Reconnect application, what we saw as the biggest challenges that were expected were transportation, family responsibilities, work responsibilities, and anecdotally, that's what I'm hearing a lot as well. It's figuring out how do our adults balance life with school. I think the Reconnect grant does speak to that with being able to enroll part-time and having 6 credit hours. I really think that's a game changer for a lot of our adult students. But I think for a lot, especially our moms who are figuring out where their kids are going to go when they're in class, it's become a real challenge.
Other questions? Commissioner Coben.
Mary, thank you for your report. I'm assuming that some of those that were eligible but not already enrolled and chose not to enroll, they came to you originally, but they didn't even fill out a FAFSA, I noticed. You had 14% that dropped out before the FAFSA. Do you think they needed more help the way our mentors work in Tennessee Promise with the whole FAFSA thing, or did our FAFSA efforts dovetail with our Reconnect potential students?
So we definitely did collaborate, but there's very much room for opportunity and room for growth. I think that going into the next year, we now know that this is something we need to focus on, but we also have the contact information of each of those students and our Reconnect navigators across the state. So going into next year and even the spring, I think we do need to have a renewed emphasis on the FAFSA completion.
And one more question, navigators to students, what's the ratio there?
So it really depends across the state. I'll say Yeah, it really, it's hard to say because our Tennessee Reconnect communities look so different across the state.
But to be clear, though, Mary, we're talking like one per hundreds,
Yes,
if not
and in some
thousands.
places, one per thousands.
Yeah. So
Yes.
all of our Reconnect communities kind of on day one were playing from behind just in terms of staffing to the volume that Mary mentioned was a blessing and a challenge.
And you use the ambassadors mainly for marketing to get the word out, but they are not qualified to be navigators.
Yes, that's
Okay.
true.
All right.
Commissioner Winton, did you have?
It was more of a dovetail on that one, just to think about the persistence part of it and what other efforts to go to try to ensure that these students actually stay. So I know that we were in one meeting before, and there was a school that talked about they send text messages when they realize, oh, this student has been out of school for the past 4 meetings, and they'd been in class pretty consistently before. So I didn't know if we had any programs like that, or if that was something that we were thinking about doing.
Absolutely, that's a great question. So our Reconnect communities right now locally are partnering with their local institutions, and the partnership looks different across each community and across each institution. I will say, as we are bringing the Reconnect Community Network in-house, we will be formalizing what that partnership looks like and formalizing what those efforts look like across the state.
Other questions for Mary? Okay, great. Mary, thank you so much. That was
Thank you.
great. Thank you. All right. Well, unless there's an objection, we'll recess for lunch and be back, what time, Director Krause? 12:30. Therefore, we will come back at 12:30. So we'll recess until 12:30, please. Thanks. If everyone would take their seats, please, we're going to pick back up where we left off. Thanks very much. Okay, Crystal Collins, the 2019-2020 Operating State Appropriation Recommendations.
Good afternoon. I'm happy to say I'm not between you and lunch, but I also know that time is short, and so I'm going to not go into as much detail in this presentation as I had planned. We did provide the slides to you earlier, so I'm happy to answer any questions offline or at the end of the presentation if there's something specific you would like to discuss further. Uh-oh. Oh no. There we go. Okay. So today, starting on page 6 of your agenda, item 3, we are coming to you with a staff recommendation for an increase of $64 million in recurring funds for our community colleges, universities, and colleges of applied technology. This recommendation is driven by increased outcomes generated by these institutions, including enrollment and completers at our TCATs, and then completers and graduation rates at our community colleges and universities. The $64 million represents a 5.9% increase in funding over the 18-19 year, and this is the highest year-to-year increase under the new outcomes-based funding formula. And this is strictly because of increased performance at our institutions. This is coupled with a tuition range of 0 to 2.5%, which Stephen will talk about in the next agenda item, and also includes additional funding for our TSAA financial aid program. And you'll recall this is our need-based grant aid program, an increase of $12.3 million. Thanks to legislative investment over the last 5 years, this program has increased by 75% and is nearly $101 million in the 18-19 fiscal year. Unfortunately, we still have about 30,000 students that are eligible that do not receive funding, and this investment of $12.3 million will fund approximately 7,000, about 6,800 of those students who are currently eligible. We are also recommending $13.6 million for our specialized units. In previous years, we referred to these units as non-formula units. That's a misnomer now because we are using formulas to calculate growth need for these institutions. So these specialized units include our colleges of medicine, our agricultural institutes, and our program initiatives like the Centers of Excellence and the contract education. Lastly, we are recommending $9.1 million for strategic initiatives. These are statewide initiatives and investments in those specialized units, including $1.1 million at the ETSU College of Medicine to increase the number of pediatric surgeons servicing all of Northeast Tennessee, as well as a $2.1 million investment at the Tennessee Board of Regents for programmatic startup at our Tennessee Colleges of Applied Technology. Looking specifically at the $64 million, and of that specifically at $60.4 million for our outcomes formula units, I just wanted to focus on our top 4 performers this year. We have a lot of really good news, and this sort of dovetails with what Dr. House was speaking about earlier, specifically that our number 1 performing overall institution is Motlow State Community College. And this is 100% driven by success in the Tennessee Promise Initiative. 16.6% increase of about $2.5 million from year to year. That coupled with Volunteer State with an 11.8% increase. These 2 institutions as our top 2 performers were our top 2 performers last year as well. So we believe this is the beginning of the promise effect on the funding formula, and we expect to see continued increases at our community colleges as we move into future years. Additionally, Tennessee Tech is our number 1 performing university and our top 4 performing institution overall, with a 7.6% increase, about $3.8 million of that $60.4 million. Taking a closer look at one institution specifically, East Tennessee State University is our number 2 performing university. Last year we did focus on Tennessee Tech, so when able, we like to look at other institutions so that you can see how performance is happening at our different institutions. At ETSU this year, let's see, where are we? Yeah. ETSU increased completers of about 6% increase in bachelor's and associate degrees and a 4% increase in doctoral degrees, and this will result in about a $1.25 million increase for that institution over last year. Additionally, ETSU from last year to this year, so from 16-17 to 17-18, increased their 6-year graduation rate by 10 percentage points. This will garner about $183,000 new dollars in the funding formula for them. An overall recommendation for ETSU of just under $4.25 million. Looking at our top performing community college, Motlow State Community College. And one of the things, I've shown you graphs like this, similar graphs like this over the last 3 or 4 years. What I would like to point out about Motlow State here is that every single outcome, they are at or above how they performed last year. Every one. And so what this says to us is there has been extreme growth at Motlow State in completers and progression and other metrics that identify performance at our institutions. Specifically, Motlow awarded 887 associate degrees in 17-18, and this is a year-to-year increase of 20%. Additionally, that will lead to about a $1 million increase, which is almost 40% of their total overall increase that we're recommending today. So, completion of associate degrees at our community colleges is driving the formula for those institutions. Another important piece for Promise is transfer, and this is something that the partnership between universities and community colleges it is a necessary key part of the Tennessee Promise initiative. Motlow State transferred out about 680 students in 17-18, and this is a 35% increase over what they did last year, year to year. And so not only are they enrolling more students and completing more students, they are transferring those students on to other institutions so that they can continue their education elsewhere. Very briefly, looking at university outcome changes, bachelor's and associate degrees are up 1.2%. That's about 300 additional bachelor's and associate undergraduate degrees at our universities. And again, this is a raw outcome count, so raw outcome 16-17 to raw outcome 17-18. Also of importance here, the 6-year graduation rate. So we are continuing to increase the number of degrees that our universities produce every year. We're also doing it with more full-time students and on-time completion. So graduation rate is up 5.6 percentage points to an average of 60% for the first time in the history of the funding formula across all universities. Looking at community colleges, let's go back, sorry. So looking at community colleges, and this was mentioned briefly previously, community colleges increased all award production by 7%, and this is bolstered specifically by overall associate degree increase of 8%. That was in Chairman Cope's remarks earlier today, and an increase in long-term certificates, so those certificates of 1 to 2 years, of 10%. Additionally, our community colleges transferred just under 6,700 students with at least 12 credit hours to other institutions, and many of these students moved on with a credential. So speaking specifically about Tennessee Promise, and this is the real driver of the funding formula, and has been since Promise was instituted in 2015. What we're finding is that a mature Promise program is driving outcomes at our community colleges and is starting to drive outcomes at our universities. This slide shows the effects of those students on our community colleges. Of all progression metrics in 2017-18, so that top left corner there, 45% of them were generated by a Tennessee Promise student. So a student who at some point was touched by the Promise program. They might not still be eligible or participating, but they were eligible when they started college. 45% of all progression metrics are those students. These students then are staying enrolled at institutions and are moving through the pipeline either to an associate degree or are transferring out to other institutions. 1/3 of all associate degrees awarded in the most recent academic year were Tennessee Promise students, so 34% of all associate degrees. Additionally, in that same year, 40% of students at community colleges who transferred out with at least 12 credit hours were part of the Promise program, so that's that top right portion there. So 40% of transfer students, and of those students, 60% of those left the community college with an award. So we're transferring, so of all transfer students who were measured in the funding formula in 17-18, 40% of them were Promise, 60% of those left with an award of some kind from their community college before they transferred. For students who transferred before completing an associate degree, but completed one through a community college university partnership through the reverse articulation reverse associate degree program, 21% of them were Promise students. Now, as I mentioned, these students who are completing at our universities, we're 6 semesters in now, they have started to transfer to our universities and are starting to trip metrics at those universities. 5% of all metrics, or 5% of all progression metrics at the universities in 17-18 were generated by students associated with the Promise program. So universities are starting to feel the effects. And additionally, 36% of those students, so of the 5% of progression metrics at universities that were Promised, 36% of those received an award from a community college before moving on. So they're staying at community colleges and completing and then moving on to universities in order to pursue bachelor's degrees. One final point on completion metrics at our institutions. Universities awarded nearly 7,000 more bachelor's degrees in 17-18 than they did in 2004-05. So that is a sustained growth year to year, where in 2004-05, about 16,000 degrees were awarded, and in 17-18, over 22,000 were. At the community colleges, it's 5,000 more associate degrees each year than were about 15 years ago. So this continuous and sustained increase is at the heart of the Drive to 55 initiative and is key to meeting the goal by 2025. This should look very familiar to those of you who've been on the commission for a while, have been attending these meetings. This graph now shows, this is our 9th year of the funding formula. And this shows the cumulative change in appropriations at our universities due to the formula. You'll notice that our #1 performing university over the lifetime of the formula is Austin Peay State University. Since the formula was instituted in 2010-11, Austin Peay has increased their overall appropriation by 58.3%. And that is driven heavily by bachelor's degree completion and progression at that institution. Additionally, our #1 performer this year, TTU, has moved from 7th overall last year to 5th overall, and so jumped 2 spots due to their performance this year in a very competitive outcomes funding formula cycle. Looking at our community colleges, and I'm only going to do this one briefly, and then we're going to move really quickly on because there are 13 institutions here over 9 years. It can get a little crazy. Of particular interest with our community colleges is the varied performance from year to year and institution to institution. For instance, we had a top performer at, I believe that is Pellissippi over the last 2 to 3 years, and now it is Motlow. And Motlow, in as recently as 14-15, I believe, was our 2nd lowest performing community college in the model. And they are now our top performing community college. And again, that is Tennessee Promise. And the effects of that institution's growth and enrollment and their performance in the model. So it's not just that they have more students, it's that they're doing things with them. They are completing them, they are progressing them, and they are moving them on. So looking specifically at just 3 institutions within the community colleges, again, Motlow is that line that goes straight up there at the top. The red line, that is Columbia State Community College, and I wanted to show them to show that we do have some institutions that just follow the average, right? We see this in the universities. ETSU is right at about the average every year, and that just shows average performance related to average growth and appropriations. And Columbia State is an example of that in the community colleges. They are either at or right below the average every year that the funding formula has been instituted. The other line that is up there is Cleveland State Community College, and I wanted to talk about Cleveland because Cleveland had a very similar story to Motlow a few years ago, 3 or 4 years ago. They were performing at about the same increase. When there was a decline at Motlow, there was a decline at Cleveland State. When there was overall growth across all institutions, there was overall growth at Cleveland. Last year, Cleveland had struggled a little. They were our lowest performing community college. But this year, they're our 3rd performing community college. And so there is opportunity for change and growth, especially at our community colleges in a short time frame if you're producing more bachelor or associate degrees. So just a brief overview of the appropriation recommendation in front of you today. We are recommending $64 million for our outcomes formula units and the Tennessee Colleges of Applied Technology, $60.4 million of that going directly to the community colleges and universities, $3.6 million to fund our Tennessee Colleges of Applied Technology. We're also recommending a state investment of $12.3 million in the state's Tennessee Student Assistance Award, supporting the neediest students in Tennessee, and additionally recommending $13.6 million to fund operating cost increases at our specialized units, and $9.1 million to fund 7 strategic initiatives at those units. These recommendations together are the core of a $1.7 billion higher education operating appropriation request, a total recurring increase of $107.6 million, or 6.7%, which is an unprecedented increase request. But again, it is driven by performance by our institutions as measured in the outcomes formula. So I think I did that in less than half the time I was asked to. But I'm happy to answer any questions. Questions are the most important part of the presentation.
Thanks, Crystal. Questions for Crystal? Commissioner Coben?
Crystal, the Motlow situation, do we have any information about which Motlow campus that is? Is it all of them?
So I'm going to guess, and I will have Emily give me dagger eyes if I'm wrong, but I think that this is happening mostly at Smyrna. And that the main campus is not growing at the same rate that the Smyrna campus is, or have Chancellor Tidings give me dagger eyes. Yes, okay. So I do believe it is happening. It's happening at the Smyrna campus rather than at the main campus.
And do you think that's the population explosion down in that part of Middle Tennessee?
I'm getting a general head nod. Yes, ma'am. I believe so.
As a chance of being very smart to have moved into that area as Motlow did and opening that campus. And I have one more question. I think it is southwest, and it's still below the 0% line.
Yes, ma'am.
Could you talk to us about that, or maybe Dr. Tidings can?
Sure. I mean, we've been aware of the struggles at Southwest. They are a very enrollment dependent institution, and they experienced some of the largest increases during the recession. And so they were starting at a very high enrollment when the funding formula was instituted in 10-11. And they've definitely had some recidivism in their enrollment. So their enrollment has declined, and that's just because the economy has gotten better. I will say about Southwest, this year, normally we worry about them because they will be our lowest performing community college. They weren't this year by a long shot. They were a 6.2% increase. They are showing significant growth in associate degrees year to year. We have very high hopes for Southwest that they have turned the tide. And even in a no new money scenario, they would be receiving $1.3 million. So even if we were to receive no money from the state this year, they are one of the positive institutions who outgrew themselves and everyone else.
Okay. Good trend. Thank you, Kristen.
We had the opportunity, Commissioner Stafford, Commissioner Watson, and the mayor and myself had the opportunity to go visit Southwest. It's been about a year ago now. And I think what we were struck by was it was very clear that, kinetic change was underway. They have used Achieving the Dream as an incredibly powerful vehicle to map out their student continuum. And if you go back to that chart, Crystal, and you look at that uptick, so there's Southwest, and I think we had a very frank discussion at the July 2017 meeting about Southwest, and you see that uptick is significant between last year and this year, and while we never try to predict what will happen in the formula next year, I think you're going to see a general upward trend. They've really focused in on making sure the pipeline where we were leaking students is no longer doing that. Dr. Hall has really been impressive.
Thank you. Other questions for Crystal? All right, thanks very much, Crystal.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have a recommendation from staff, and at this point in time, the floor is open.
I move that we adopt the recommendations as provided by staff.
Motion made by Mayor Wharton. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Stafford. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify so by saying aye. Are there any opposed? Yes, sir. Comptroller Wilson abstains. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The motion carries. All right, thanks very much. Next, we've got Stephen Gentile for 2019-2020 student fee recommendations.
Thank you, Chairman Cope. Good afternoon, members of the Commission, Director Krause. I just want to take a brief second to thank everyone who made the prior agenda item and these next two agenda items possible. Over the last year, at last year's Commission meeting, President DiPietro asked that we revisit how we fund our strategic units, and we have, and this year our specialized units are reflective of the weight that UT plays in those, and I'm thankful there. We revisited our research and service specialized program outcome as well, looked at dual enrollment and the way it plays in the formula with the weight structure. Just want to thank everyone at the systems and at the institutions for making this possible. It takes a lot to get where we are, and I do very much appreciate it. And a thanks to our team, Alex, who provided the Tennessee Promise analysis as well. Moving on to student fee recommendations. This is something that we've been doing every November for quite some time, where we pair a guiding range for tuition and mandatory fees. We pair that with our appropriation recommendation. What's new, and we're moving into our third year of doing, is in May, after the legislative session comes to an end, and we know what the actual appropriation will be for next year, this body votes on and approves a binding range for tuition and a binding range for tuition and mandatory fees. So this is a precursor to that. As a reminder, last year we had a 0 to 3% binding range in tuition and fees combined, which continued in the fourth lowest consecutive growth in tuition and fees that we've seen in over 4 decades. What I am very pleased to see is that we are seeing this affordability initiative done by the institutions and by this body play out in metrics that we've been tracking for a very long time. Looking at our overall student debt, there's a report that we report on every year called the Project on Student Debt that looks at the average debt load of students leaving university with a bachelor degree, something we've been tracking for a very long time now. Last year when we reported it to you, We are proud to say that we had the 17th lowest debt in the nation among our university graduates. This year, we are 10th lowest in the nation among university graduates. This is not a number that we are going to be proud to really put out there until it gets lower and lower and lower. This is a drive that we will always have. But to see that trend in affordability at our institutions, we're very proud to see that. And I will also say, this is not yet going to have Tennessee Promise data playing through it. So we'll look forward to seeing how this number changes going forward. But in truth, when we're looking at our student tuition and fees, student affordability is the primary consideration of our model. We look at how we're doing with the financial aid and are pleased to say that we have one of the highest financial aid per capita in the country, the second highest in the Southeast. We look at average debt levels, as I just talked to you about. The cohort default rates, how many of our students are defaulting on their debt. And right now, we are about average for the United States. And then we look at our peer institutions, our southern peer institutions for THEC peers, and see how are we doing on our overall tuition levels. And we are typically slightly below average on our tuition levels. That's one consideration that we look at. It's the primary consideration that we look at. We're looking at tuition and fees, student affordability. But also we take into consideration the realities on campus. What are the enrollment growths at the campus? What does inflation look like? How are costs increasing overall? This year, we're looking at about 2.5% inflation rate. That factors into our overall projections. And then last but not least, our state appropriations. This year, we're at $64 million in state appropriations. That is a 5.9% increase, as Crystal said before, on our overall state appropriations for community colleges, universities, and TCATs. That's a 5.9% increase on a base of $1 billion or so, about $1.1 billion. It's important to remember that north of $1.7 billion is collected by higher education in tuition and fees. So while a 5.9% increase in state appropriations is a very good news story, and we're very proud of that due to the growth at the universities and community colleges, there is another substantial part of the revenue picture that we must take into consideration. So looking at where we're going this year, again, last year we were at 0 to 3%. What we as staff are recommending, based on that $64 million, based on student affordability, is a 0 to 2.5% increase in tuition, a 0 to 2.5% increase in tuition and mandatory fees combined. As a reminder, this is applicable to in-state undergraduate students, and this is a guiding range. Our institutions are already thinking about their budgets for the 19-20 year. This will help them guide that budget process with the projected appropriation recommendation. And again, going off of that $64 million, even though as a higher education sector, we are up 5.9%, that picture does differ by institution based on how well they performed in the formula. An institution in our tuition model, an institution that performs very well in state appropriations, our tuition model suggests perhaps they don't need as high of a tuition increase. On the other hand, an institution that does not receive as big of an increase in appropriations, perhaps they do need to have a little bit higher tuition. So this graph I'm showing you shows you how our calculation works. On the y-axis is the overall appropriation change by institution of 2.5% to 8%. That's the minimum to the maximum of our recommendation. And at the bottom is the range of tuition change, 0 to 2.5%. And you can see how institutions fall on this map. We do take into consideration something that we've never done before. With that stress test I mentioned earlier, we now do know the financial health of these institutions as well. And that plays a role in our overall process here. But again, yes, Mike?
I'll say something that I know every president and CFO is thinking, and that is these are THEC considerations, things that a president may be thinking about that, remember, the state funding share is small for many of these institutions, 30% or less at the universities, half and half at the community colleges. Things that I bet presidents are thinking about when they're thinking about their range may be either a historical faculty salary deficit that they are trying to march back on, or really thinking through their own plan to either address certain specific academic programs. There are specific institutional considerations that I think, as the staff, we owe you to say presidents will have a particular perspective on this relative to the majority of their funds that don't come from the state.
Thank you, Director Kraus. To put this into real terms for you, what does a 2.5% increase look like for the average university student, or a 1.25, halfway through that range? On average, for university tuition and fees that we have, about $9,500. Halfway of that range is a little over $100 increase for the year for the student. Again, this is tuition and fees combined. The full range is about $230, $235 increase. Of course, for community colleges, that's smaller, between 50 and 100 from the midpoint to the top point of that range. Should this body enact this range for a guiding range, and should the General Assembly and the Governor fund our appropriation recommendation, we will see the fifth lowest, consecutive lowest growth in tuition and fees. This graph in front of you shows you what the midpoint of that range would look on that graph that I showed you earlier, where the institutions are falling halfway in between on average. I am happy to answer any more questions. Again, our staff recommendation is 0 to 2.5% on tuition, 0 to 2.5% on tuition and mandatory fees combined.
Thank you, Stephen. Questions for Stephen? Commissioner Watson.
Stephen, could you go back a couple of graphs? Yeah, right here. It appears to me that you end up with a perverse result here, is that high-performing institutions get more money from the state, and low-performing get less, and therefore increase their tuition more. Isn't that a sort of perverse outcome?
Commissioner Watson, yes, sir. An excellent point there, and this is what we get into when we're talking about having both the hands on state appropriations and tuition. This is what our tuition model, which is very black and white, looking at all those projections, and of course student affordability guides the overall conversation. This is what it shows us. However, we ideally would have more institutions falling to the bottom of this range, but we recognize that a decline in state appropriations could lead to a need to have more revenue coming from elsewhere. On the positive side, if you're an institution that's not performing well on outcomes, having that revenue come in and investing in what you need to invest in, like those student support services I mentioned earlier today, to help those students guide their ways to completion, could be a positive outcome of this.
Next question: would any institutions be financially challenged if they had zero tuition increases?
By our analysis, yes, sir.
And which ones would those be?
Those would be institutions that in the past they talked to us last year in May when we came in front of you. We know UT Martin, as said earlier before, has been struggling. That is changing with enrollment, upwards of 4.5%. 5%, I believe, is what data was showed today. But to be honest, it takes a while. That enrollment, we are not an enrollment-based model for our funding formula. It will take some time for that increase in enrollment to play through in the outcomes formula. So a 0% tuition increase for UT Martin would not be advised for their current financial health.
Thanks.
Other questions for Stephen? Yes, ma'am. Commissioner Coben.
Stephen, once again, I said this earlier this morning, but I have thoroughly enjoyed and learned from the process that you all used in coming up with your tuition and fees recommendations. It's got very objective data in it. The campuses, I think, are well represented. It shows a snapshot of how healthy the campuses are and what the situation will be given relative tuition increases. I just want to thank you and the staff for putting it together.
Thank you, Commissioner Coben.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, Stephen, thanks.
Thank you.
All right, we have a recommendation from staff, and the floor is open. All right, Commissioner Johnson with the motion to adopt the recommendation of staff. Is there a second? Second from Commissioner Dishner. Further discussion? Commissioner Watson.
Yes. I guess I continue to be concerned that tuition increases are inimical to our ultimate goal of enrolling and graduating more students. Even a $232 annual tuition over 4 years, and if you take a 6 or 7% interest rate, and you compound that out, that gets to be a pretty big number. It almost doubles. I think some of the evidence that I've read or some of the articles about impact of tuition increases on enrollment go from 0.025% per $100 to much higher numbers. And unless you're really, really financially challenged after exhausting all other alternatives, I think tuition increases are just not something that we ought to endorse. And I certainly respect the staff's hard work on this, and I know you considered a lot of things, but just long term, I don't think this is in the tuition increases are not in the interest of our achieving our drive to 55. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Watson. Great points. Other comments or questions? Okay, we have a motion and we have a second. Further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify so by saying aye. Aye. Are there any opposed? Yes. Okay, Commissioner Watson, let that be noted. Let's do a roll call, actually, since we have a no. Please, ma'am.
Chairman Cope.
Aye.
Commissioner Dishner. Treasurer Hargett. Secretary Hargett. Sorry. Commissioner Johnston. Aye. Commissioner Coben.
Aye.
Treasurer Lillard. Not here. Commissioner Roach. Aye. Commissioner Stafford.
Aye.
Commissioner Solyak. Aye. Commissioner Watson.
No.
Commissioner Wharton.
Aye.
Comptroller Wilson. Commissioner Winton. Mr. Chair, we have 11 ayes and 1 nay.
Okay, that being
Motion
the vote, the motion is carried.
Pass, yes.
Okay.
2 points of personal privilege, if we could, Mr. Chairman. One, I want to thank truly our fiscal staff. If you've never been in Parkway Towers at midnight, it's a lovely place. The sum of what was just presented to you is months of work. And I think that we as the THEC staff try, we view our primary constituent as students and the board. We also view a very important constituent are the institutions, and trying to balance that is always a challenge. I think our fiscal policy staff in particular have struck a really appropriate balance. The other one is we're actually very honored to have Bob Moran here. Bob is the Education Policy Director for the United States Senate Help Committee, working with Senator Alexander in his role as chairman. We are fortunate in Tennessee to have the chairman of the Help Committee be a Tennessean, and we are in a really frequent dialogue with Bob about federal higher education policy. We'll be meeting with him afterwards along with Board of Regents, but just wanted the opportunity to recognize him and thank him for being here.
Thank you. Okay, last item on the agenda is number 5, and it's 2019-20 capital project recommendations. Patty Miller.
Chairman Cope, Director Krause, and members of the Commission. The total request for capital outlay this year is $374.86 million. There were 16 projects that were requested as part of the 1920 budget, and 15 projects were submitted. We are recommending 9 of those projects. All of the submittals were received and distributed to the review committee on July 16th. The review committee consisted of 5 THEC staff and 2 staff advisors. We had 3 review meetings beginning July 20 and continued August 16th and 23rd. The projects were graded by the individual scores and ranked according to the median scores. The review categories stayed the same as they were last year. Of course, this is the second year as part of that capital outlay process with all of the SBAs and UT and TBR going to THEC for the evaluation and recommendation of the capital projects. The format and form of the request is specifically designated in 5 categories. The Drive to 55 and the strategic plan is number 1. 2, the consistency of the project with the institution's strategic plan and master plan. 3, the thoroughness of the project development, including scope, program cost, and the understanding of the project's impact on the campus. 4, the space needs of the overall campus and the programs on the campus.
and 5, the match component. The next slides are summaries of the top 5 capital projects. Number 1, in order of priority, the UT Institute of Agriculture, Energy, and Environmental Sciences Education Research Center. The site is on the current location of the Ellington Plant Science Building, which will be demolished. The new building will house teaching laboratories, research, public service labs, offices, classrooms, and a 500-seat teaching and learning center. The project also includes a surge building that will house displaced occupants during construction. This is a project that's been a planning priority since it was established in 2009. It was acknowledged that the Ellington Plant Science Building was in very poor condition and is not suitable for renovation or addition. They began planning in 2012-13 with $2 million being appropriated for and approved for the planning, and in 18-19, $4 million was approved to continue planning and prepare for the project. So this is a long-range plan and part of the long-range plans for the Institute of Agriculture. One quote from the proposal: the UT Institute of Agriculture resides at the heart of the land-grant mission of educating, discovering, and connecting. Significant challenges are ahead of us as we work to find real-life solutions for our state, our region, and the world to the most pressing agricultural issues that we face. The number 2 project in priority is the McMinn County Higher Education Center. The project is a collaboration between TCAT Athens, Cleveland State Community College, UT Extension, and the adult education and local industry. The Cleveland State and TCAT Athens service areas are identical, and as a result, this is a natural partnership with these shared resources. The center will serve community-driven programs ranging from high school diplomas, certificates, degrees, and professional qualifications for the entire community. The project will satisfy 4 requirements. It will expand the TCAT programs as identified in the TCAT Master Plan. It will relocate the current Cleveland State Community College lease space. It will relocate both the UT Extension and the adult education, and it will create space for local industry training to upgrade the existing workforce. It's noteworthy also that there is a significant land donation by the McMinn County Economic Development Authority amounting to a value of approximately $240,000, and also a very generous gift in the amount of $3.2 in grants from the City of Athens and McMinn County, making this project possible. One of the reviewers commented, as the state begins to think intentionally about the development of new capital projects and the value of collaboration, this project is a strong example of a joint venture between local community, TCAT, a community college, and the state's land grant institution. This is the type of hybrid purpose project that should be explored in detail in the future. The next project is the School of Concrete and Construction Management at MTSU. The project was defined in the last 2 master plans, 2008 and the 2016 campus master plans, and it will include a relocation of current functions from the Voorhees Engineering Technology. That building is a 1942 building in very poor condition, and it's identified for future demolition. The project includes the demolition of Abernathy and Eazell halls on the campus where the project will be located, and an addition to the satellite chiller plant to increase cooling capacity on the campus. The School of Concrete and Construction Management is a signature program that's been producing career-ready jobs and graduates for, career-ready graduates for over 25 years. And there's a strong construction industry support for the program. The school is now partnering with 3 community colleges, 2 TCATs, 4 high schools to support Tennessee students who want to develop credentials for careers in the construction industry. The 4th project is TTU's engineering building. The new building will provide improved interdisciplinary spaces for all departments in the College of Engineering, and it will address a very significant space shortage for the college. Over 75,000 net square feet of shortage for the college, according to a detailed space analysis. The new building will support the physical organization of engineering programs, now located in 8 buildings across the campus. So this will provide an opportunity for them to construct the building and then backfill these older buildings with renovated space. And then the 5th project is ETSU's Humanities Building. The new Humanities Building will be in the campus core adjacent to the quad and the renovated Culp Student Center, and the project will selectively run college. Moving on to capital maintenance, the recommendation this year is for $149.38 million. We had 88 projects that were submitted this year. The capital maintenance funding is allocated on the basis of a standardized formula that we use that calculates a predicted amount for annual capital renewal. The calculation is based on E&G space only. In other words, it does not include auxiliary space, and it's based on the building's age and replacement cost. The predicted target amount that would be needed for capital maintenance, according to this formula, is approximately $200 million. The capital maintenance request last year was $124 million, and the request is being increased this year to approximately $150 million, which will significantly reduce the deferred maintenance. Each institution is given a proportional target lump sum amount for all of their submitted maintenance projects. There are also 2 special initiative projects, including $3.5 million for capital ADA improvements for accessibility across the campus, and also $2 million for TBR and the LGI Campus Security Task Force projects, Phase 3. In conclusion, we are very excited about these projects, and as we move forward in the area of capital, we want to continue to support a process that encourages projects that are best aligned with the state goals, with the institution's academic plans, and also produce projects that are high quality and well developed. The fiscal year 1920 capital budget is presented for your consideration and approval.
Thank you, Patty.
Thank you.
Questions for Patty? Mayor Wharton? You were smiling at me. I didn't know.
I've been around this a long time, and I know how thorough this process is. I always say this. I don't want the folks in the audience to think that this is not a methodical, deep dive process. And we have our own engineer on staff now. Is that correct?
Patty is indeed a licensed architect.
Yes, the engineer. We didn't have that. It was so, but now, so this is not lay folks doing this.
Thanks, Mayor. Commissioner Stafford?
Unlike the mayor, I'm not as long-term in terms of my knowledge and being around this process. So I'm going to ask just a question for understanding and clarification. With regard to cost overruns on projects like these that happens periodically, sometimes more often than not, how is that managed historically, and how is it funded after we've already approved the funds?
That is a great question, and having served in the capacity as campus architect in years past, for me, the answer to that question lies in good planning, and planning from the very beginning, from the initial inception of the project to the process that the campus will undertake in the way of programming, citing, the kinds of studies that one might do in the way of infrastructure in advance of the project. And really, as we look at as the SBAs are getting their sea legs, as it were, and they're going forward with their independence in capital, that's one area that we want to be looking at, is to know that these projects are well planned. And as we review these projects, we are selecting projects that are well planned and well defined. That doesn't directly address your question. What I'm saying is that, we feel like that is the foundation. The overruns can be handled in a variety of ways, and frequently that happens at the building commission and state architect level in terms of how that might be handled with cost overruns, whether or not there's funds that are added to the project locally from the campus, or if they have to go back, the designers are responsible for bringing the projects in the budget. That is a fundamental requirement by the building commission, and so those requirements are in place.
Other questions? Okay, Patty, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, the floor is open. Mayor Wharton.
I move the adoption of capital allocations as presented by staff.
Very good. Motion made by Mayor Wharton. Is there a second? Second from Commissioner Coben. Further discussion? Any discussion? Okay. Hearing none. All in favor signify so by saying aye. Aye. Are there any opposed? Yes, sir. Comptroller Wilson abstains. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the motion is carried. All right. Commissioner Roach, did you?
Yes, I asked to be recognized. You opened the meeting today with a report about the conference that you went to and about how the state of Tennessee is admired throughout the nation for what we've accomplished. More importantly, I think today's report from the institutions that we've heard from and from the staff is quite impressive, and there's a lot of credit that goes around for accomplishing what's been accomplished. But I think this is the last commission meeting we have before Governor Haslam leaves office, and I think it'd be appropriate for us to express to him our appreciation for his leadership and support of education in the state of Tennessee, both in his vision as well as his funding of the institutions. So if we could express our appreciation as a commission through a resolution, I think that would be appropriate.
I think that's a great idea. I'll take that in the form of a motion. Second, and by acclamation, I think we all agree that's an appropriate thing. And thank you so much, Commissioner Roach, for saying that. And frankly, I completely missed that fact that this is the last meeting we're going to have with Governor Haslam as the governor. So I echo your comments and want to say how grateful I am to Governor Haslam for giving me the opportunity to serve on this commission, and for his leadership and his vision and his commitment to education in the state. It's been transformative. And frankly, I think at this point, I'm happy to open the floor from other commissioners who may want to comment one way or the other about this. Mayor Warden.
I'd like to show our appreciation to the governor for the independence he has granted us, for those of us who have been around and who from time to time in days past were actually summoned to the governor's office and taken to the woodshed. Those things actually happen, folks. Back in the day, fortunately, we've not been taken to the woodshed over anything that we've done here. And I think that's one of the things that has allowed this state to excel, is that whatever we do is based on research. Of course, quite frankly, we're such a leader that most of the time we're working on our own research as to what works and what does not work. But again, we are greatly appreciative of the fact that we have been allowed to work without interference in a way that a professional body such as this should be allowed to function, and I am deeply appreciative of that.
That's a great perspective, Mayor Warden. Other questions, other comments? Okay, very good. Well, I guess maybe I'll ask Scott, with respect to the resolution, is that something that staff can prepare? We'll sign it when it's drawn up? Okay. All right. Other comments or anything else anybody else wants to add before we adjourn? The next meeting, the winter meeting, will be January 25th, 2019. And if there's nothing else, I'll declare the meeting adjourned. Sure.